Up with someone random, this the social awkward suicide that violence and violence. I swear she had my head, but in different
I have to figure out how I'm going to review your homework when I have no book directly in front of me. So give me a sec. I'll put myself on mute. Okay. I'm going to share our answer key and get started shortly. I'll be flipping back and forth to the book online because I have to get into my office and get my book. So hopefully it won't jazz up the answer key you're going to see in front of you. If it does, just yell out to me. So before we get into the course, as I think everybody who's here today was in finance, but if you didn't hear what I had to say about what's happening for the rest of the semester, we are going to be in the online format. That was a letter sent out by President Leary late yesterday. Our class is a mandatory class for your degree, so you will receive a grade in it according to our outline, as you always have. What the school is opting to do, though, is for general education courses and for free electives, where if you took the class just to fill in a class as an elective, you would be able to take the grade as, I guess, a satisfactory grade or a letter grade. And a satisfactory grade, or like that would be you earned a C or better in the course. Doesn't affect your GPA at all, but that's for other courses you may be taking now. And I would check with your instructor if you're able to take that type of grade or not. But for our class, we're moving, business as usual. We're just meeting this way instead and completing all of our testing online. I know I've thought about this. I don't know if I physically said this to you or sent an email out, or maybe I dreamt it. I don't know. But our group project will just be a paper. We're not doing any kind of presentations. I just would like you to continue working in groups and complete your papers. I am going to take a look probably tomorrow at the second part of the, I guess it was, the accounting principles part of the paper that you submitted to me. So I'll give you some feedback shortly on that. Okay, anybody have any questions right now? Let's see who else here. Okay. Okay, well then what I'd like to do then is review the problems I asked you to complete for today's class and ask me any questions that you may have. And once we finish reviewing those, I'd like to wrap up with the part of the lecture I did not get a chance to do yet. So give me a second here to find the problems. And I believe the first one was, let me open up one more thing. Give me one second. Okay, 14.1, parts 1 and 2, or else I think I said 14.1. Yeah, 1 and 2 will do. And then 14.7, all parts, and then 14.12. Okay. All right, so you should see problem 14.1 in front of you. I'm just going to flip back over into my book. So we have here January 1, 2021, Instaform Inc. issued 10% bonds with a face amount. Okay, whoever came in, if you
Sorry,
could.
that was me.
Okay. I thought I muted everybody. Okay. All right. There we go. Okay, so January 1, 2021, Instaform Inc. issued 10% bonds, so that's our contract rate of interest or stated value, with a face amount of 50 million, principal, par value, face value, maturity value. That's what that is. So that's the information on the bond certificate, dated January 1. The bonds mature in 20 years. The market yield for bonds of similar risk is 12%. Interest is paid twice a year. So the first thing we needed to do was determine the price of the bonds at January 1, 2021. And we know how to do that with our magical present value calculations, right? To record the issuance. Then we're going to do the same calculation, but then instead assume an interest rate of 9%. All right. So I'm at the answer key now. The first thing we need to do, and I always start with the interest, because we want to know what are the number of interest payments and what interest rate should we use to calculate present value. And that's really based on, those numbers are based on information about the interest. Now, how much interest is the corporation required to pay each interest payment date? So that will be our payment amount when we're calculating the value of the interest today. We promise to pay 10% on $50 million but we're going to split it between 2 payments a year. So 50 million times 10% times 6/12 would be $2.5 million. So that's our payment every 6 months for the next 20 years. So when we're calculating the present value of those payments, we would be using present value of an ordinary annuity. Now, if we use the tables in the back, our N wouldn't be 20, but 40. 2 interest payments a year for 20 years. So there'll be 40 interest payments. What interest rate do we use? The market or the yield? But we need to convert it for 6 months. So the market or yield is 12%. So multiply that by 6/12, 6%. So our I is 6, our N is 40. Now you could use, as I said, the tables in the back. But if you were in finance class, or most of us, I think all of us are taking finance class, we know we got these great formulas now, or we've even have our finance calculators. So you can input that information into your finance calculator the present value of the interest only, that's the one part of the bond, $37,615,750. But a bond isn't just interest payments. We also have one lump sum payment at the end. So we also need to know what's the present value of that $50 million one lump sum today. We use the same I and the same N to determine the factor or the present value. So if we use the present value of one table, because that's what we want to know, one lump sum, 50 million at the end, what's it worth today? Our factor would be 0.09722, or you could use your finance calculator. The present value would be 4,861,000 of just the principal repayment. So the total present value of the interest payment and that one lump sum principal payment would be 42,476,750. So these bonds would sell for less than their principal, which makes sense because the market or effective interest rate is 12%. Our bond contract rate is only 10. So everybody else is paying around 12, we're only paying 10. So in order to even out that interest rate difference, we sell the bonds for less, take less money up front, pay more in the end. Debit cash for the 42,476,750. Credit bonds payable for the principal, and the difference is stored in the contra discount on bonds payable. Questions? Okay, well then let's see how this will change if instead the market interest rate is at 9%. So we're still paying out $2.5 million in interest. That doesn't change. Our bond contract says 10% interest, $50 million twice a year. So 6/12, we'll spread that 10% annual payment out twice a year. So 2.5 million is still the interest amount that will be paid. So we need to determine the present value of that, but now using an interest rate of market of 9%, which would be a 4.5% if it's twice a year, and is still 40. So now our factor for the present value of an ordinary annuity changes. It would be at 18.40158. You could find that on your table or use your finance calculator. N is 40, I is 4.5, payment is 2.5 million, and solve for the interest. Remember, make sure if you're doing that, your PMT word that is highlighted is end, because you want to make sure you are calculating for an ordinary annuity. Then the present value of the principal still calculated the same way. You want to know what's that 50 million worth today, but now use an I of 4.5%, N is 40. Present value of one table will be used to find that factor. So the present value of the principal would be 8,596,500. So the bonds would sell at a total of $54,600,450 or above their principal, because our interest rate on our bond is higher than the market. Ours is 10, the market's at 9. We only, over time, only want to pay 9%. We're locked in. We have to pay 10% in actual cash every interest payment. So how do we get it so that we only really are paying 9%? Get more money up front. It's actually like the bondholders are prepaying for that part of the interest difference. So we'll debit cash 54,600,450, credit bonds payable for the principal of 50 million, and the difference is credited to that adjunct account, premium on bonds payable. $4,600,450. So more practice in determining the selling price of the bond and how we journalize it. Are there any questions on it? Okay, then we're off to problem 14.7. I'll get there. We're doing the whole problem here. Here we go. So we're going to practice that some more, and then we're going to do some journal entries. So I need to flip to my book, and I'm going to problem 14.7 in my book. Just give me, oh, went too far. There we go. So page 822. McWhorter Instruments sold 400 million. So there's your par principal amount, 8% bonds. That's your contract rate. Dated January 1. On January 1. The bonds mature on December 31st, 2040, so in 20 years. The market rate of interest is 10% right now. Interest is paid twice a year, June 30th and December 31st. They made this nice for us, didn't they? Right? Our interest payments don't carry over. So our interest period is all within that 1 year period. Purchased so an investor, Blanton, purchased 400,000 of the bonds as a long-term investment. Okay, so let's first focus on McWhorter. So we're going to determine the price the bond sold for on January 1. Then let's just do like 2A, 3A, and 4A first. Then we'll come back to B after we finish what the journal entries will be for McWhorter the day they sell the bonds, the first interest payment, and the second interest payment, assuming they amortize discount or premium at the effective interest method. So I'm going to go on back. So again, more practice with determining the selling price of the bond. First, determine how much interest the bond will pay each interest payment date. 400 million times 8% times 6/12. $16 million. Then determine the present value of those interest payments. The number of interest payments will be 2 a year for 20 years or 40. So N is 40. The interest rate you'll use is the market or yield rate of 10%. Since the interest is twice a year divided by 2, 5% is the interest rate. So you'll find your factor on your present value of an ordinary annuity table, multiply it by the $16 million payment each every 6 months. $2,074,545, 440. 274 million, that's how you say it, right? $274,545,440. Do the same calculation for the principal, present value of the principal, but now we'll use the value of one table because we just want to know what's that one-time payment worth today, using the same N and the same I we just used. So our present value of our principal would be $56,820,000. So the selling price of the bonds today would be $331,365,440. Questions on the computation? Okay. So we're focused on the A. We'll come back to B later. So McWhorter is going to debit cash $331,365,440, credit bonds payable for the 400 million, and debit their contra account discount on bonds payable for $68,634,560. Remember what that really is. It's interest. Okay. And that's a lump sum interest payment we're going to make at the end to the bondholders. Why is that? Well, they only gave us 331, 365 today. We're giving them back 400 million. But instead of giving it to them over the next 6 months, we're just giving it to them as a lump sum at the end. Today, we hold that amount in the discount on bonds payable, and we actually recognize it over the life of the bond, even though the payment is made in a lump sum at the end. Now, I guess they don't, okay. I'm going to stop sharing this, head on over into Excel. I might have to flip back and forth, just so we can, there we go. Let me share that. So we can review and remember this amortization table. I'm going to try to remember. I'll go back into your book quick and make sure I do it the way they do it, because people do it a little bit differently sometimes. Let me just grab your author's version so I don't mess you up there. Okay. So I'm doing a table similar to what you see on page 779. So let me just write down date, cash interest, effective interest, balance, and outstanding balance. Okay. All right. So our first column will be the date. Then our next column will be the cash interest. So that's how much we're actually paying in cash to the bondholder. Then the next column, your author calls effective interest. And you could think of effective interest as the amount we'll be debiting interest expense for. Some authors call it interest expense, that column. So these tables aren't written in stone, but they are all similar. And they're just to help us determine how much should we debit interest expense for, how much should we credit cash for, and in this case, how much should we credit discount on bonds payable. And the next column, I kind of wrote it down, but I didn't. Oh, it says increase in balance. I hate that. I'm going to do this. Decrease in discount, because that's truly what it is. And then our final is our outstanding balance of our bond, which is really the carrying value of the bond. So as of the day they sell the bond, which is, I guess it's 1/1. It doesn't matter. Yeah, 1/1. The outstanding balance of the bond, principal minus the discount on bonds payable, is the 331, 365, 440. And I'll make sure these are in dollars and cents so they look better. There we go. Now, the first interest payment, we already figured out how much interest will be paid. $16 million. And that will be the same over the life of the bond. So let me format all of these columns so I don't have to keep doing this. There we go. Now remember, the effective interest, or how much we debit interest expense for, we will calculate every interest payment. How do we calculate that? We take the carrying or balance or carrying value or balance of the bond. I just got to get back into my problem here. Sorry. Problems, there we go. Times the market rate of interest, which I didn't jot it down, which is 10%. So we're going to take 331, 365, 440, times 10%. Now this is every 6 months, so 6/12. So if we do that, I'm just going to do it on my calculator. I know I could do it in Excel, but we get 16,568,272. So that will be the total amount we debit to expense, interest expense. So the next part is just taking column C there, the interest expense, 16,568,272. So that's how much we total interest expense debited in total. Of that, 16 million of it is being paid out in cash right now. So subtract the 16 million. So that's how much we decrease the discount on bonds payable. So let's take a look at that. So that's the numbers. I'm going to stop sharing Excel, go back over to my answer key. So the first interest payment, here is our journal entry. And if we create one of those amortization tables, it's very easy then to just put those numbers into our journal entry. Debit interest expense for the amount we calculated, 16,568,272. Credit cash for the actual cash part of the interest we're paying. Part of the interest expense is being removed out of that discount account. So we credit or reduce the discount on bonds payable for the 568,272. Are there any questions on that? Okay, I'm going to go back over to Excel. I'm getting pretty good at this, running around sharing stuff. Let's see. All right, so that's how much we decrease our discount. Now, if you wanted to, just so I could show you, remember, our discount account starts with a debit balance in it. I had to stop and think, huh? I was trying to remember the amount of 68,634,560. So the day we sold the bonds, we debited 68,634,560. We just reduced or debited that account 568,272. So the new balance in our discount on bonds payable will be 68,066,288. So the outstanding balance of our bond will be the principal of the bond, 400 million. Sorry if you hear my dog drinking. He just came in from a walk. 68,066,288 is subtracted, the balance of the discount on bonds payable. So the new carrying value of the bond after that interest payment, 331,933,712. And we always have to update that because when we calculate the next interest expense, that's what we're going to use to calculate it. The cash interest payment remains constant. That's what we promised to pay on the bond certificate. But now let's calculate how much interest expense will be debited at the second interest payment. So 331,933,712 times 10% times 6/12. $16,596,000, and I'm just going to round it to 686. Subtract that result, or subtract the 16 million from the interest expense we just calculated. Okay, that was very wrong. So now we'll decrease our discount 596,686. I'm going to come back over to my Word document, my answer key here. Hopefully I did that right. There we go. So the second interest payment, McWhorter will debit interest expense for the $16,596,686, credit cash for $16 million, credit the discount on bonds payable for $596,686. And they will continue to do that based on the calculation for that interest payment period on that amortization table. So it's not normal not to have an amortization table, is what I'm trying to say, because we want to see those numbers in front of us. I'm going to show you a little trick. Are there any questions on any of those journal entries before I show you a trick? Okay, I'm going to go back into Excel. Share that. Now, if you're an Excel guru, okay, you can make an amortization table very quickly using formulas. So even if you're not, take a look at this and know that you can do this. The outstanding balance of a bond when it's sold at a discount will continue to increase by the amount the discount decreased by. And if you think about it, what do we do here? Well, after this interest payment is recorded, we just decreased the discount on bonds payable for the $596,686. The new discount balance will be $67,469,602. Subtract that from the principal. Oh, sorry about that. Hold on. I'm hitting stuff I shouldn't be. I wanted to do that. I did something very wrong there. There we go. Sorry. Batting 1,000 all the time, aren't I? 400, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, minus 67,469,602 will give us an outstanding balance of 332,530, 398. Well, if you take the balance before this journal entry, so in my case, E4, add the amount your discount decreased by. Oops, wrong cell. So that's D5, not E5. D5. It comes out to be the same amount. And that's true. So if you're decreasing discount, the amount you're subtracting from your principal, that means your carrying value or your bond value is constantly increasing. So you can use a formula in there to calculate that. You can also just make sure your cell B5 is active here. Get that heavy plus sign in the right-hand bottom corner, click and drag, and it will copy the $16 million in payments. Now, I just can't remember how long this was for. 20 years. So that's 40 payments. Okay, so let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Let's do it this way. I want to make sure I have 40 payments. So I'm going to do the same thing, and hopefully this will. It's not. Let me do this. I'm going to say take A8, cell A8 plus 1, and it will keep adding 1. I have 37, 40. Okay. You guys may know a better way. That's the way I do it. I'm just going to say, okay, yeah, this 16 million, I'm doing it every 6 months for 40 periods, 40 times. Now, how can I calculate interest? Remember what it is. It's your prior balance. So I'm going to take the outstanding balance of the bond from the beginning of the period, which in this case would be whatever's in column E, the row before, times 10% times 0.5, because it's twice a year, half and half. I could make sure that cell is selected, go to the bottom right corner and copy that formula all the way down. Now there's nothing in there yet because I don't have E5 finished. What is in column D? It's the amount in the column C row, C6, minus B6. Do the same thing. Make sure the cell is selected. I just put the formula in. Go to the bottom right corner, wait for that heavy plus sign, and grab and click and scroll down. It'll copy it. This already has my formula in it. So I'm just going to make sure it's selected and copy that formula down, and watch this. Watch the magic. Isn't that beautiful? So that's how we can get an amortization table done very quickly on this bond through Excel. Now, the carrying value at the end should be $400 million. It's off a little bit, and it's probably because of rounding. So we could just fix that at the very end. And I might have done something even a little incorrectly in some of my information up the top. But just to show you, you can make this in Excel really quick with some formulas. And that's what we do. That's why it's important we know Excel. Because if not, you're calculating every single one of those for 40 periods. Who has time for that? Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing that. Go back to my answer key. You guys have any questions on that? Okay. All right, so now we're going to take a look at the part B. And unfortunately, for whatever reason, authors don't like to separate investors from the company selling the bond. And we're actually going to look at this in the next chapter. So you're getting a little preview. But in our problem in the book, it says, assume Blanton Technologies purchased $400,000 of the bonds. Now, they purchased $400,000 of the $400 million. So they bought 0.001% of them. So we don't have to do a lot of calculations. We just need to remember they bought 0.001% of the bonds as a long-term investment. So they have an asset on their books. So now we're going to see what they do. Well, the day that McWhorter makes this journal entry, Blanton, who bought 0.001%, will debit an investment in bonds for $400 million times 0.001, or $400,000. So they debit an asset investment account for the face amount. They'll credit cash for 0.1% or 0.001 of the actual cash payment for the entire bond issue. And they credit a contra asset to their investment account, discount on investment in bonds. So we have similar types of accounts. We do the accounting similar. I shouldn't say the accounts are the same, but the numbers within the accounts will be almost the same. They are the same, but from the investor standpoint, it's an asset. Now, when the first interest payment is made, Blanton is getting 0.001% of the cash. So they're receiving $16,000 in cash. They're going to remove 0.001 of the total discount, or $568, but they debit their discount on investment in bonds. And then to Blanton, this is interest revenue because they're the investor. So they'll credit interest revenue for 0.1% of the total interest expense that McWhorton, or Ward, or whatever his name is, recognized. So we're just showing you what happens on that investor side. The same thing will happen the second interest payment. They're going to debit cash for the $16,000. They're going to debit their discount on investment in bonds for 0.1% of the total discount that is recognized, and they will credit interest revenue for $16,597. Now, if you're sitting there going, well, how do they know how much McWhorter? This is the things that used to go through my mind when instructors were going over the answer key. Like, what do they call each other? No. Blanton will make their own amortization table. I'm going to go ahead over and show you that really quick. So, stop sharing. I just want to make sure I remember some numbers so I'm not flipping all over the place. They're going to show 68,635. Okay, and they bought 400,000. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to go over to Excel. Shoot. Ooh, do I have some chats going on? Okay. You okay, Candace? I guess so. Okay, let me, I'm sharing, right? I'm sharing Excel. I just saw your chats going on. Okay, so what's Blanton doing? Well, they're going to do something similar. They're going to have a date. They're going to have cash received. They're going to have interest revenue, because to them, this is interest revenue. They're going to have discount reduced, just like we did for the seller of the bond, and then they'll have outstanding balance, or the carrying value of their investment. So the carrying value of their investment the day they buy this will be the amount they paid. And then, just like McWhorton, on 6/30, how much cash are they going to receive? Well, they bought 400,000, 8%, 6/12. So they're going to, oh, come on. Just give me, there we go, $16,000. How much interest revenue do they show? They take the 331, 365 that their balance is at, 10% times 6/12. And then the difference between the amount of interest revenue they have and the part they receive in cash is how much they reduce the discount account by. That means their investment will now increase because the amount of the investment is 400,000 minus the new discount balance, which was reduced by 568, would be subtracted, and that would be your new outstanding balance on your investment. Then at 12/31, do the same thing, 16,000. They're always going to receive 16,000. Now take the 331,933 times 10% times 1/2, and that's how we get the 16,597. The difference is then decrease to the discount, and our carrying value on our investment increases to $332,530. So we're showing you that not only does the company selling the bond have to worry about keeping track of that discount, but so does the investor. And you'll see that more, as I said, in chapter 12 when we get to that next. Any questions? All right, let's do our final problem and then wrap up this chapter. And I think that was 1412. No, yeah, 1412. And 1412 deals with a loan, a non-interest-bearing installment note. Ooh, fun. Let's see. At the beginning of 2021, VHF Industries acquired a machine with a fair value of $6,074,700 by issuing a 4-year non-interest-bearing note in the face amount of $8 million. The note is payable in 4 annual installments of $2 million at the end of each year. We know there's no such thing as no interest on a note. All this means is that there's not an explicit interest rate on the note. There is interest. They're buying the machine for $6,074,700 and they're paying $8 million over 4 years for it. So the difference is actually the interest. Now what we need to do is determine what is the effective rate of interest implicit in this agreement. So what is the interest rate that they're really borrowing this at? Then we have to prepare the journal entry to record the purchase of the machine. And then we'll do the journal entry for the first payment, the second payment. And then we'll look at this last item. So we didn't get into this heavy, but now we will. So this is another type of long-term debt. Bonds was our first one, but here's our second. To determine the implicit interest rate. Now you could do this on your finance calculator, right? Or if you want to use the table. We know the present value, $6,074,700. We're not making one lump sum at the end. We're making 4 annual $2 million payments. So this is an annuity calculation. So if we take the present value, $6,074,700, divide our payment of $2 million into that, that'll give us the factor from the present value of an ordinary annuity because these payments are made at the end of each year. We know how many payments there are. So we find the N equals 4 column and then go across the row until we find a factor of around 3.03735. And that should happen around 12%. Now you could do this on your calculator by going into your apps. Your N is 4, leave I blank for now, well, just don't, make sure there's a 0 in that. Your present value will be $6,074,700. Your payment, and I'm not sure if you have to put this one of these in as a negative, we will see, is $2 million. Make sure your future value is 0 and make sure your PMT word highlighted is end. Now use your arrow keys to go back to the interest and solve, and I got an error, so that means one of them I put in wrong. So make sure one of your amounts, either your payment or your present value, is a negative. Hopefully we won't have an issue. And then solve 12%. So you could use your finance calculator or the tables. So that's the interest rate that is implicit. Now the day the loan occurs, we should debit equipment, credit notes payable, $6,074,700 for its present value. Sometimes companies will credit it for the $8 million and then debit discount on bonds payable or discount on notes payable. But that's not necessary in this one because you're not making one lump sum at the end. Since we're making the payments over 4 years, we could just credit notes payable for its current present value. At the end of year 1, how do we calculate interest? You could do an amortization table. What you do is like we did for similar to a bond. You'll say, what is the outstanding balance of my note? In this case, and you can make a T account, notes payable, $6,074,700 is the balance because that's what you borrowed. Multiply that by the implicit interest rate, $6,074,700 times 12%. And we always do that calculation first. That part of that $2 million payment is for interest. So debit interest expense, $728,964. Debit notes payable for the difference between the cash amount you paid and the part that's interest. So of the $2 million cash we credit, $728,964 of it is interest. The other part actually debits or reduces notes payable. So 1271036. So now our notes payable has a balance of 1271036. $4,803,664. The original amount we borrowed or credited notes payable for minus the amount we just debited it for. It's this new balance of $4,803,664 that we use to calculate interest for the second year. So you always use the most up-to-date balance of notes payable to calculate the next period's interest. So when you multiply that by 12%, interest expense for the next payment is $576,440. The part that will decrease notes payable is $1,423,560, and then we credit cash. And you would continue to do that for the remaining payments. At the end, your last payment, you will have no balance in notes payable, all the interest is recorded, and the note is done. And I encourage you to go, we just don't have time, but you go and do those remaining 2 journal entries. Are there any questions on that? In the next part, I'm just going to flash back to my book because I want to get the requirements. Suppose the market value of the machine in part 5 was unknown at the time of purchase. So we didn't know it was $6,074,700, but we knew the interest rate on loans similar to ours was 11%. Well, now in this scenario, since we don't know how much the equipment is worth, we need to calculate it. So we find the present value of the $2 million, 4 periods, 11% interest. So we would have to calculate the equipment's fair value and the notes payable's fair value using that system. Debit equipment for the $6,204,900, credit notes payable. Any questions on that? When you calculate your interest portion of your payment under that scenario, you would use the 11%. Okay, so that is all the homework I had assigned for us to review. Do you guys have any kind of questions on that? We're not done yet, but let's see if you have any questions on any of those items. Okay, then I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to go into PowerPoint and finish up talking as much as I can over the next 20-25 minutes about Chapter 14. All right. Now I opened it up and it won't share. Let's see. Let me try it again. There's open a PowerPoint. There we go. Okay, so now you should see my PowerPoint. Let me see where I left off. I thought it would take me right there. It didn't. We did debt issue. We talked about notes. Anything with notes we did. I did installment notes just now with you. Financial statement disclosures. Okay. So this is probably going to be, maybe there'll be some exercises on this. Sometimes a company can choose, and it's usually on a bond certificate, if it's a bond, to pay off debt early. And if it's a note, they may just be able to pay it off early. And we call that early extinguishment of debt. So when a company pays off, let's say, a bond before it matures, they must remove all account balances related to the debt that they're paying off. And any difference between those accounts and the cash paid to retire that debt is either gain or loss. Now, on a bond, it's usually stated right on the indenture how much the company will pay off early if they choose to do this. So let's take a look. January 1, 2022, Masterware Industry calls its $700,000 12% bonds when their book value or carrying value was $676,288. They're going to call them or pay them off $685,000. So what do we do? Well, first of all, we know the book value or carrying value of the bond. It's $676,288. What's the principal? $700,000. So if these bonds were paid off at maturity, you would have paid $700,000. They currently have a carrying value of $676,288. So I'm going to subtract that. So that means currently the discount on bonds payable has a balance of $23,712. If the carrying value is $676,288, the face is $700,000. Remember, face minus discount gives us carrying value. We use our algebra, $23,712. So we need to know that balance because we need to remove it. So we're going to credit cash for the amount of cash we're paying out, $685. We're going to remove the bond's book value by debiting bonds payable $700,000 and crediting discount on bonds payable $23,712. We subtract the bond's book value from the redemption value and we get $87.12. Now, if you're going, well, isn't that a gain? No, we're paying more than we should. We're paying $685,000 for debt that only has a balance of $676,288 on our books. And that happens. So we debit a loss on early extinguishment. That is a loss account, goes on our income statement in the other gains and loss section. So that will decrease our net income. We successfully removed the debt we're paying off early. So that's one thing that could happen. Here's another thing that could happen. Sometime bonds are what we call convertible bonds. What does this mean? A bondholder has the right in a certain time period to convert their bond into stock. Now, why would they do that? Well, maybe the stock is selling for a high rate of money and they want to invest in the stock and sell the stock and make more money. Okay, so it's the investor who decides this, and it has to be on the bond certificate. These are issued usually this way to sell bonds at a higher price. Sometimes it's used as a medium of exchange in mergers and acquisitions. Don't worry about that. Enable smaller firms or debt-heavy companies to obtain access to the bond market. So there's different reasons why these bonds would be sold. Let's take a look at, though, what we want to worry about from this chapter. On January 1, 2021, HTL manufacturers issued 100 million, 8%, so 100 million is the face, 8% is our contract rate, convertible, meaning they can be converted to stock, debentures, bonds, due in 20 years. They sold them at 103, so they sold them at a premium. The bonds are convertible at the option of the holder into no par common stock at a conversion rate of 40 shares per $1 million or $1,000 bond. HTL recently issued non-convertible 20-year 8% debentures at 98. Okay. So on the day the bonds are sold, the company is going to debit cash for $103 million, credit convertible bonds payable, still a liability, 100. They may never be converted, just that the bondholder has an option. And then credit premium on bonds payable. I'm not worried about IFRS. Okay. Another way, or this is international, I'm not doing international. When the conversion option is exercised, don't worry about international. We have enough problems with the United States, right? On January 1, when they issue these bonds, blah, 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 bonds are converted. Okay. Half the bonds are converted at a time when the remaining premium on bonds payable account is $2 million. Half the bonds are converted. Now, when you have a bond that's converted to stock, okay, we convert at what we call the book value method. We call it the book value method. What does this mean? You will record the stock value at the book value of the debt that was converted. So our book value of the debt that's converted is 100 million. Half of that is converted, so 50 million of the face value. The premium was at 2 million, so we have to convert half of that or remove half of that. So the book value of the bonds is 51 million at conversion. Debit bonds payable for 50 million. Debit the premium on bonds payable for 1 million. Remove that. Credit common stock, it has no par value for the full 51 million. So that's what we mean. The stock is converted or is valued at the book value of the bonds that you removed. Don't forget the premium. Add that or subtract the discount related to the bonds that are being converted. And now your bonds are gone away. The bondholder isn't there anymore. Now that person is a stockholder. I'm not worried about that. Let's see. Okay. What time is it? I'm thinking if I want to, okay, we have some time. Let's kick it up another notch. Sometimes we have what's called induced conversion. And if you think like women out there, if you're thinking induced, okay, forced forced conversion through the call provision could happen. So when the specified call price is less than the conversion value of the bonds, okay, we could have an induced conversion, or we can encourage voluntary conversion by offering an added inducement. So maybe we could say to people, you sure you don't want to convert your bonds into stock? We'll give you some extra cash. We'll give you some what we call stock warrants. So we sweeten the deal. That's what they call them, sweeteners, to try to encourage people to voluntarily convert their bonds to stock, because maybe we need them to do that. Maybe we don't have the cash. Maybe, you know, there's many reasons. So what the company will do is give the bondholder what we call a stock warrant. And they make them what's called detachable. What does a stock warrant do? And this is a piece of paper. And here's what it gives the person holding this paper a right to do: to purchase a stated number of shares of stock at a certain price within a certain period of time. So they don't have to buy it at the market price. They buy it at a price that's already indicated on this piece of paper. And stock warrants, if they're detachable from the bond, they're a separate investment, and people actually sell these to other people. So they're traded in markets. They have their own market price when they're detachable. So what happens when we sell a bond that has a detachable stock warrant? Let's take a look. On January 1, 2021, HTL manufacturers issued 100 million 8% debentures due in whatever, 4 to 15 years at 103. Accompanying each $1,000 bond were 20 warrants. Okay, so the bond, when you bought a bond for $1,000, you also had 20 pieces of paper. And what did it allow you to do? Each warrant permitted the holder to buy one share of no par common stock at $25 a share. Shortly after selling the bonds, these detachable warrants were listed on the stock exchange and had a price of $3 per warrant. So people could buy these now from these bondholders. So what happens? The company will debit cash for the amount that they sold the bonds and the stock warrants for, because that's what they really sold here. They just didn't sell a bond. They'll credit bonds payable for the amount they owe. Now, if you're going, why are they debiting discount on bonds payable? They sold these at a premium. No, they didn't. When you sell something other than a bond, you sold not only the bond, but you also sold these warrants. And these warrants have a value. What is their value? Well, each $1,000 bond, so if you sold 100 million, you sold 100,000 bonds, has 20 warrants. So multiply that by 20. And each one of those is worth $3. So you also sold here warrants that have a value of $6 million. So they just put a 6 there. So we need to credit an equity account. This is a part of stockholders' equity called stock warrants. So it's a new T account called stock warrants. We credit stock warrants for $6 million. Really, we sold these bonds at a discount because $6 million of the cash is related to this separate stock warrant. So it's really like we sold the bond itself at 97. So the plug, the difference, due to this, the way we sold the bonds, is debited to discount on bonds payable. And then that would be amortized over the life of the bond. Crazy, huh? Now, I know you're dying there. You're going, well, what happens if somebody actually does buy the stock using these stock warrants? Let's see. Oh, okay, that's, what are they doing here? 1 million warrants times 25. Okay, it looks like they didn't give us the full thing here. Let me go back to your book. It looks like in this scenario, somebody or some of the bonds, okay, 1 million of the warrants were exercised. Now, how do you exercise a warrant? You go to the company and you go, I have a piece of paper here that says I could buy one of your stocks for $25. And 1 million of those were presented. Now, the person presenting the piece of paper still has to pay for the stock, but they don't have to pay market value. They could pay $25. So they're going to debit cash for $25. What's the value of the warrants that were exercised? $3. That's what we had 2 million warrants that were sold, but only 1 million were handed in so far. So $25 million was received when those warrants were exercised. We reduce that stock warrants account back here that we originally said, hey, we sold 6 million of these things, value of 6 million, that people can buy our stock. Well, when they actually exercise them or turn those pieces of paper in, we take the part that they exercised, or half of them, out of that equity stock warrants account by debiting it. What are they buying? They're buying common stock. How much did they pay for it? A total of $28 million. $3 million when they bought the bond, and then another $25 million when they actually exercised the warrant. So they didn't just pay $25 million for those stocks. They paid a total of $28 million. If I didn't blow your mind with that one, I think that's where we're going to stop. Do you guys have questions on that? So you might have an exercise or so on that, or multiple choice. Let me just see if there's anything else. I think between interest rates. I think we're in pretty good shape with chapter 14. Yeah, we're running out of time anyway. So I think you have everything you need to proceed with getting their exercises done, the graded assignment, the rest of the assessments for chapter 14 in Connect. And I think I still need to get that test out there for you, but I will this afternoon for you to complete the test just on chapter 14. Did I write down the dates here? Of course not. Oh yeah, I did. So we're going to leave that test open and available for you through April 3rd. So you have some time to get that done. All of your stuff for chapter 14, though, I would like you to have done by the 29th. Then on Tuesday, we're going to start talking about chapter 12, which is the investment chapter. Okay, so you want to make sure, I think just your overview videos are complete for that class so that you start becoming familiar with that. Are there any kind of questions? Okay, I'm going to send a reminder about the test, let you know when it's available. If you have anything between now and Tuesday, just jet me an email. And if I don't hear from you, then I will see you on Tuesday. Have a great weekend and stay healthy. Take care, everyone.